Welcome back to Star Wars Shovelware. My name's Luke, and today on the channel we're going to be taking a look at Neptunia x Senran Kagura Ninja Wars on the Nintendo Switch, a crossover between the hyperdimensional Neptunia and Senran Kagura game series, which sees characters from both worlds colliding in a ninja-themed hack-and-slash RPG, as the world of Gamninjustri is invaded by beings from an alternative dimension. Now, I won't profess to know anything at all about the Neptunia or Senran games, but in all honesty you don't really need to, though fans will likely recognise some familiar faces in this one. The important question though is, how does it play and is it worth your cash? So hit that like button, subscribe for more Switch related content, and let's find out. So the story of Neptunia x Senran is set in the world of Gamninjustri, on an island populated by ninja clans, all in various states of conflict. The two main clans though, and the ones around which the story is centred, are the ninjas of the Compa style, comprised of 4 ninja goddesses, each with their own favourite colours, and the shinobi of the Honey Pa style, whose 4 great ninjas appear to favour their own particular dress sense. For years though, these two clans have been going at one another in a struggle for power, but after a hot looking chick in some red latex known as Yo Gamer invades Gamninjustri, the two clans must set aside the differences and unite in an attempt to repel the invasion. Now, the story itself is, as you might expect, pretty anime stuff, and the characters themselves fit into all of the stereotypical roles, but the writing is decent, having plenty of humour to keep the plot light, and the odd steamy bathhouse scene, because, you know, this is a game full of smoking anime babes, so why not? There are a few different elements going on in the storyline, but none of it is really hard to follow, and for the most part it's pretty enjoyable and keeps the flow of the game going, but I will say that it feels a little rushed in my opinion. There are only 8 chapters in the game, so things wrap up quite quickly, with it taking me around 9.5 hours for me to work through them, with the inclusion of me doing a ton of different side missions, and many of the side characters just disappear as fast as they arrive, with most of the story being focused around the two clans and Yo Gamer. While the game features full Japanese voiceovers, unfortunately there's no English voice acting with this one, so that means plenty of dialogue to read through, which I will admit towards the end I ended up speed reading through, but I still managed to catch the most important parts of the plot. Overall though, I found the story to be pretty enjoyable. It succeeded in giving me a couple of laughs along the way, and it served its purpose well enough. So gameplay in this one then primarily sees you working your way through semi-linear levels, hacking and slashing your way through a bunch of yokai and Yo Gamer's mechanical army, and as the story progresses you'll unlock ninjas from both clans to play as well as a couple of third-party ninjas, each of which comes with their own movesets and ninja abilities. As you progress through each level you'll sometimes get locked into an area and have to defeat waves of enemies before a barrier is lifted or activate a few switches to open the way forward, but for the most part things are kept pretty simple, and it's generally just a case of fighting your way through a bunch of minions before finishing off with a final boss fight. Now, the controls in the game are pretty straightforward too. You have your standard combo attack, can throw shurikens and kunai to attack at a distance, and then you have 4 different ninja abilities activated by holding the L button and hitting a face button. Your defensive manoeuvres consist of blocking attacks by holding A or dashing out of the way with the ZR trigger, and the game also allows you to lock onto enemies with the tap of the ZL trigger, though I only really use this during boss fights. Now, the combat itself attempts to get pretty technical, introducing a bunch of different status effects for your abilities such as poison, slow and paralysis, but if I'm being honest, I didn't really find much use for them, as the enemies were usually dead before I even saw them take effect. The main ones that I used were the attack and defense buffs for my characters, and these kind of ended up determining the characters that I used throughout the majority of the game, which were pretty much the hardest hitting ones, and I only really ended up using the others once or twice just to gauge their ability in combat. Now there are a couple of other important mechanics to the combat, one of them being the Shinobi Extreme abilities, which can be activated after filling the EX gauge and which hit like a truck, breaking enemies' defences and leaving them vulnerable. And then there's the Furin Kazan Drive, which comes in 4 flavours, each of which either buff your attack, heal you, or increase your defences, and I use these 2 things a lot during the game, especially on bosses. But in general, I found the combat kind of boiled down to dashing into enemies and wiping them out with a few ninja skills, with very little need to actually defend yourself or use the ranged attacks, bar 1 or 2 boss fights. Now outside of the missions you'll have access to things like a shop where you can buy consumable items, equipment such as different shuriken and charms, and spirit gems which buff various attributes, but again these didn't really seem to have much of an impact on the overall game. The spirit gems, which can be slotted into a board with additional slots opening up as you level up, can improve things like your attack and defense against yokai, the Steel Legion or bosses, buff your HP and increase things like your chance of dealing stats effects, and placing them in certain configurations can increase the gem's effects further. But I actually just ended up slotting in a bunch of money and drop chance gems and was able to make it all the way through the game without much issue. Now you're also able to set up your team formation before heading into missions, picking a leader and partner which you're able to switch between on the fly whilst inside missions, and you can also assign their abilities, each of which costs a number of stamina bars which regenerates as you perform basic attacks, and you gain new abilities as you level up, though as I said I usually just went with the hardest hitting ones. Aside from the party configuration settings, you also have the Peaches and Cream minigame, which sees you balancing on a giant peach and tilting your controller to keep a ball from falling off a curved line, and successfully completing this will buff your stats for several missions, but it's kind of not worth spending the time to do it, as failing it right away buffs them for a single mission anyway. Now, the final out of mission features are the Nin Chat, where you can talk to various characters to get a little more of the backstory and occasionally receive the odd item, and they also provide you with additional side quests which are undertaken from the shrine, which reward you with items, equipment and cash, and act as a way to gain some additional experience outside of the main storyline. These missions require you to do things like kill a certain amount of a specific enemy, collect items dotted about the level, or complete an objective within a certain time period, but they also take place in previously visited areas and feature the same sets of enemies, so they don't really offer up that much variety. And I think this is the key issue with Neptunia Cross Senran: variety. Throughout the story you'll encounter the same sets of enemies, albeit with a bit of a palette swap, but there are only about 10 different enemies in the game, and the boss fights are the same, you'll fight the same bosses multiple times. The game is enjoyable enough if you're just looking for something to mash your way through and taking a decent enough storyline, but to me it felt like the game tried to implement all these different features, but none of them really held any weight, and after the end credits rolled I felt very little desire to keep on playing, despite a new feature unlocking which offered up more powerful rewards, but once again just saw you fighting more beefed up versions of previous enemies. Overall, Neptunia Cross Senran is not a bad game, it's just an entirely average hack and slash action game. If you're looking for something to unwind with, it's a perfectly fine option, but it does come with a premium price tag, and I feel like there are plenty of other great options out there which offer a similar gameplay experience. So visually the game looks pretty decent on the Switch. The graphics have that familiar cartoony look to them which I've seen used in a number of different anime themed games, and they fit perfectly fine in this one, with some nice flashy effects when you use your ninja abilities, and the artwork outside of the missions is also really nice, though again you'll see the same scenes used repeatedly throughout the game. Audio wise, the game sounds good. You've got your typical punchy hack and slash sound effects which are enjoyable enough, the Japanese voice acting is decent despite me not understanding a word of it, and the music isn't bad either, with a decent selection of tracks to play along to. All round not bad stuff, but nothing overly impressive either. So the game's performance on the Switch is great, no issues at all with the frame rate even with a bunch of enemies on screen, but I did have a single hard crash which meant skipping through a bunch of cutscenes again. Issues wise, I think I've more or less pointed out everything in the gameplay section. Neptunia x Senran tries to do a lot, but falls flat and delivers a very average gameplay experience. It's enjoyable enough to play through, but things just remain very samey from one mission to the next, and a lot of its features just go unused, as do its characters in my experience. I did have fun playing though, even if it was just for the fact it offered a break from more taxing titles, and so for a rating I'm going to be giving Neptunia x Senran Kagura 3 out of 5 stars. If you're in the market for a hack and slash RPG with a light-hearted anime storyline and combat which keeps things simple, then this may be the game for you, though you may want to wait on a price drop with this one. And so that about wraps up this review of Neptunia x Senran Kagura Ninja Wars on the Nintendo Switch. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and if you did, hit that like button. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments section below, and if you watch and enjoy my content regularly but are not yet subscribed, then please consider doing so. For now though, I just want to thank you all once again for watching, and until next time, take care of yourselves and game on.